for underrepresented businesses. Today's discussion will highlight organizations dedicated to educating, informing, and providing resources to small businesses and minority-owned businesses, including Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, women-owned, and LGBTQ. So to begin, I'm going to give you some results of the poll that you were just taking. And it looks like, as it relates to, are you a small or minority-owned businesses, we have 13% small businesses. We have 22% minority-owned businesses, and in some cases, the businesses that responded are both. And then we have other, which is 65%. What resources are important to the folks who are on this roundtable today? Looks like the most important resource that's necessary is navigating potential business opportunities. And that's good to hear, because that's exactly what AIM is focused on, is making connections so that people can, get to know the business owners, the large companies, and see if there's an opportunity for you to partner with those companies. And AIM is making that a priority. Second in line is looking for capital for growth. So we will be talking about that as we go forward in the conversation. And then finally, administrative help. It looks like 22% of you are looking for some help in trying to, look at RFPs or things of that nature. So with that as a start, I think I'm going to jump into introducing today's participants. To begin, we have Glenn Lloyd. Glenn has been a pioneer in the field of transformative urban economic development for over 25 years. He's the founder of City Fresh Foods, a nationally renowned food service business, as well as the Urban Farming Institute, a community-based nonprofit. He helped found the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, which is BECMA, and currently he's the executive director of the Foundation for Business Equity and CEO of Mill Cities Communities Investments. Good morning, Glenn.
Good morning, Donna.
Next, I'd like to introduce Daryl Byers. Now, Daryl, he is with us, but is having sort of an office emergency, so he will join us as soon as he can, but I will introduce him nonetheless. Daryl came to Interrise from Habitat for Humanity Greater San Francisco, where he was the Chief Advancement Officer and has previously held leadership roles at Easter Seals Bay Area and Earth Justice. He was the recipient of the Eleanor Collier Award from the educational organization Case District 1 for his contribution to his profession. Daryl holds a BA in history from the College of the Holy Cross. Next, I'd like to welcome Laura Teicher, who's the executive director at Forge, which helps innovators navigate the journey from physical prototypes through commercialization and impact at scale. Prior to joining Forge, she served as executive director at the Boston chapter of TIE, the largest global not-for-profit network dedicated to fostering entrepreneurship. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
And finally, Harold Blackwell. Harold is a multi-billion-dollar account manager, a national senior fellow, an award-winning entrepreneur, and owner of a strategic financial consulting company specializing in landing $100,000 plus funding for minority-owned businesses. Working for General Electric, UBS, and other major corporations, Harold advanced his career from an operational services representative to a client relationship manager. His corporate career culminated in 7 years with the Royal Bank of Scotland in Stamford, Connecticut, managing the relationships of 20 multi-billion-dollar institutions. Welcome, Harold.
Thank you, Donna. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you all here. And I think from this panel, you can see that they do represent everything that we hope to talk about today, which is how to find capital to grow your business, what are the supports you need to make sure your business is strong, and how to connect with the bigger organizations where you can offer your services or your products. So to begin, and I hope that in this conversation that the panelists will not only engage with each other, but also with our audience, and we'll get to the audience questions in a minute. But I'm going to start with a question about what are the top 3 issues businesses have when they come to each of you? And I'm not asking what your core capability is, but I'm asking, what are the issues that you typically see when a business comes in the door? And I'll start with you, Harold.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so essentially, just to clarify, so I'm the Director of MBE Growth and Development with the Greater New England Minority Supply. So a lot of the issues that we normally see businesses come through the door in terms of wanting help and assistance with is in regards to access to capital, in some instances, specifically working capital or capital to expand the growth of their company, and then also help and assistance for specific such as
Harold, I'm going to stop you there because we're having some audio issues. Maybe someone can adjust that. And in the meantime, I'll turn that question over to Glenn. Glenn, what are some of the three issues that you see with businesses who come through the door?
Sure, Donna. Yeah, and I just was talking to my team earlier, and we're up to about 90 companies that we've had some high touch relationship with. And so it's a good sampling, and these are all Black and Latinx. People think it's all about capital. It is a big chunk, but some of the patterns that we see actually starts with HR. It's talent and who's around them and who needs to be on their team, who's not on their team. It's actually evaluating the team leaders, right? And so where their strengths and weaknesses. And so that's a big chunk of what we see as issues. And the other one is how do you present yourself or say strategize to get to market, right? It's really, if it's about growth, it's in marketing is different from sales, right? It's really understanding what your value prop is and how you position yourself and what the strategy is. And I think and sometimes people a lot of our small businesses need some support around that thinking. And then clearly, then you're moving into sales execution. So those are the two patterns. And then clearly, capital is pretty tight up there with the top three, right? In terms of you're not moving without what I call the grease on the wheels, which is capital.
And Laura, what do you see when folks come in the door? And I should also say, this isn't just for small and minority-owned businesses. We're looking for all kinds of business, veteran-owned, women-owned, LGBTQ-owned. There is some consistency across all these businesses. So can you speak to that, Laura?
Well, yes, and consistency is right, because everything Harold and Glenn said, but I'll go a step further and share that the way that Forage helps innovators on that pathway from prototype to commercialization is with a laser focus on manufacturing. Because of that, the number one issue we're seeing is folks coming to us for sourcing problems. And as we all know, global supply chains have been disrupted. That's driven a lot of innovators to Forge. But aside from what we do, I would echo that the most common challenges we see, because we've worked with over 500 startups and innovators, is getting into manufacturing or trying to get into manufacturing before there's been adequate customer discovery and product market fit. And we make sure we intervene if we see that before we start connecting them with manufacturers. And then, of course, funding in the startup world, that's a constant drumbeat. And there are a few things that Forge does to try to help with that as well.
Yeah. Let me go back. Oh, I was just going to go back to Harold and see if his audio issue has been solved. Harold.
Hi, Donna. Sorry.
Oh, that's better. So do you want to go back and try and restate what you were talking about in terms of the three issues that you see when folks come through the door?
Yeah, so specifically funding or access to capital, specifically access to working capital and monies to be able to expand their business and company. And then in terms of business development, so meaning access to contracts, be it government specific or contracts with corporate or large corporates or corporations. Well,
so Glenn, how does that affect the folks that come to the door at the BEI? You said capital is not the number one thing. How do you figure that into your overall strategy? Where does that come up?
Well, maybe I should just be clear. In a lot of minds, especially the entrepreneurs, capital is the number one issue. Mm-hmm. But when you pull back, the cover and you really get a sense of what's happening in their business, it usually is not the first priority that they need to be focused on. So it is the common understanding that, it's capital. And so what, Donna, what we try to do is exactly that. And I see some of our strategic advisors listening in who are amazing. And they, really spend quality time with these entrepreneurs. And, we have a certain process where we kind of investigate. And that's when we kind of go into discovery and get a sense of really what's happening. And so that's really, and again, I think the patterns that we see, it's a combination of things, and a lot has to do with your talent management. A lot has to do with, to Laura's point, really understanding your product and how you're going to move that into market, and understanding, your kind of market, acquisition strategy. And then down the tier is operations, right? I mean, where basically is if you're not running a tight operation for efficiency, then you're really not in the game either. So those are when you add capital, those are the four kind of legs of the stool that we constantly see, or we focus in around supporting.
So I have a tough one for you, Laura. So when you have somebody who comes through the door and they're all hyped up, and I'm one of those people, I started a business, $3,000 of my savings, a computer and a Rolodex, and I'm like, okay, I can make this work. And then people say, nah, you don't have enough chops yet. What do you say to somebody who comes in the door? They've got all this passion, all this energy. They think they have a great idea, but they don't have the things around them. What do you say to them to get them started?
I think it's really important at Forge that we're here to serve and to help, and not to lecture. So we have a really strongly developed process over several years and over 500 companies to ask a really focused set of questions that we know help us identify if they're truly ready to go to manufacturing. They often come and say, I just need someone who can injection mold this. And then we might uncover, actually, you need more help with design for manufacturing and simplification, or you'll burn through your runway and go out of business, and we're going to intervene and help. Or, oh, it seems that you actually don't have the funding to engage with manufacturers, and you need help with your go-to-market strategy to get that funding. The way we approach it at Forge is we say, have you considered this? Would you be interested in this? Here is our suite of partners who can help if it's outside of Forge's scope. Here are our workbooks and our resources. So we really do try to offer an opportunity to engage around these other issues we commonly see. But you hit the nail on the head. It's very common for someone to come to us and say, I just need someone who can make this thing out of sheet metal. And then we uncover opportunities to help more as we go.
And I'm going to invite Daryl. Nice to see you. I already introduced you, but so we're glad you're able to get back on. The question to you is, you have people, you're Enterprise, you're really working with startups, right? From, really tiny organizations that have a big idea. What do you say to them to get them grounded so that, you're not taking away their passion or their excitement, but you're giving them the real story? What do you say?
Yes, and I think what we really get at is working with really established businesses. And for those businesses who are new to the market, we have over 10,000 alum of our program. And really what we find during any process with a lifelong learning about growing your small business is that peer-to-peer interaction. So it's really engaging them with other peers, with other CEOs, with other startups to make sure they really understand what's involved in creating a growth plan and growing your business, and what you're really going to be up against as you move into starting your business and growing it.
Okay, great. So now, and again, I ask that you all interact on these questions too. It's not just me asking questions. I'm sure you have questions of each other, and you've been in these kinds of forums before, so you know each other and the kinds of things that you have to deal with. I'm going to ask you a threefold question, which is, describe the businesses that are best served by your offerings, and tell me what the offering is, and then the problem that you solved. And so I'm going to kick it to you, Harold, as the first question.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Donna. So basically, I wouldn't necessarily say there's a specific mold or fit for business or company, because we help companies and businesses across the board and spectrum. So here at the council, we're helping companies who are doing manufacturing, who are doing construction, services, etc. So it's not necessarily a specific mold and fit. In terms of when it comes to revenues, etc., we don't have a minimum cutoff with regard to who we will help with in terms of where you are in the business paradigm. We can work with smaller companies and businesses, because we also have other partners, like for example, the panel members and their organizations, where we have relationships with them, and also mutual partners and collaborators. And so in terms of what we try to do is, in addition to that, with regard to the MBDA operating grants that we recently were awarded last year, and just recently won a newer one in 2022, last month, as a matter of fact. So we're trying to, this month, we're trying to go out here and help companies and businesses where and the MBDA Business Center has a cutoff of $500,000. We are able to now help companies who don't meet that threshold and provide the services and assistance that the federal government provides or has access to, with regard to sister agencies and departments, and then also the council. So there's not necessarily a specific fit or mix that we offer, because we can tap into our subject matter experts as well. Marketing, accounting, et cetera, et cetera. It just goes more down the line, and it's not necessarily specific, so to speak. Sorry to be generic and general, Donna, but.
That's okay. I'm going to pose that same question to Glenn. Glenn, what businesses are best served by you? And is it, what stage of their business do you need them to walk in the door?
Yeah. So not to confuse matters, but I'm running two organizations right now. So let me start with MCCI, which is Mill Cities Community Investments, which is a CDFI, a community development finance institution. So essentially you got me running like a small bank. That would be a joke if folks know me. But the good news is we're open for business, and we have assortments of products, Donna, and all listening. And so we have loans that are very competitive, debt products. We are just opening up the ability to do equity, which is very exciting to me. So we can come in very patient, and then we become part owner of your company if it all works out. And then we also have a couple of neat products. One is we're calling it contract financing, where we'll finance the invoice, right, for cash flow, folks on the phone, manufacturers, and folks in the trades. So that's the first part. Like, and we actually have two tiers. We do small businesses, actually, 50 grand average loans, all the way up to the larger business equity initiative type businesses, which is the other program of which I'm associated with, which is the high touch. So the business equity initiative, we're known for really working with our businesses over time at a very kind of like a Bain Capital, a very high touch advisory model. So those would be the two pieces. And I'll end with saying is, also being an entrepreneur myself, it's really the ecosystem around the business, which is most, we really look at the whole picture, and we customize it to where you're at with your growth, and really work we wrap our arms around you. And as Harold mentioned, and we do that also in partnership with a lot of people, on this call, but also, across the ecosystem. What I've noticed is in the Massachusetts area recently, with the pandemic and so on and so forth, our small business ecosystem has actually gotten stronger to really support our businesses. So that's exciting to see.
I'm surprised, Glenn, though, that you haven't talked about some of your success stories. Who are some of your successful businesses that you've supported?
Oh, well, I don't want to call people out, but everyone talks about them. I saw Anthony Samuels on the line, but everyone talks about it. But I can tell you, Anthony, I'm not going to tell you secrets, but part of what I think we worked with Anthony early on was him really thinking about his team and getting that right number one beside him. And he ended up really making a smart decision, bringing on a COO/CFO. This is back in the day. And then we also were able to provide some capital beside that decision. So it's kind of, and we also supported him kind of cutting through on one of these big contracts he was trying to land at the time. So he's an example of this kind of broader ecosystem. But one I really like to talk about is Shop and Compare, which is a retail place where you had a transition of a patriarch, the father, handing the company over to his daughter and son-in-law, and the fact that you had such emotion tied to that transaction. Can you imagine? And the folks still had live off the proceeds of that, of their business. And they expanded in the process. They went from 2 to 3 stores, right? Very proud moment for us to go and see their grand opening last fall. But the stories go on, Donna, but I'll stop there. But
No, that's great.
Great story.
And congratulations to both of those companies, and Anthony, especially since he's also an AIM member. We're very proud of how he's been so successful, and we know he'll be, hitting up a lot of our AIM members for his services. And Laura, I'm going to say the same. Oh, you're welcome. Laura, I'll say the same thing to you. Don't you want to brag about some of the businesses that have come through Forge?
Absolutely, and always. So as I shared earlier, we've worked with over 500 startups to date. They have an incredible over 90% survival rate. And I think that really underscores how important manufacturing support is at the early stages when you're dealing with physical product, because that is frankly where a lot of your budget goes. And spending that correctly and not wasting it on the wrong processes or partners really makes a difference. I'll talk about one startup that we've worked with that you probably all know. You may not know their name, but you probably know their work. They're called BioBot. And they are the company that is monitoring our wastewater across the country to help with early detection of COVID. When we first engaged with them, they were in relatively early prototyping, and they essentially send robots into the sewers to collect public health information that they then analyze. At the time, their first application was the opioid crisis, and it was quite effective at identifying opportunities to intervene and then monitoring in real time if those interventions worked. They came to us because although their primary product is that IP, it's how they look at the wastewater, they have to send those robots into the sewers. And that is a hostile environment. And so they came to us to help with ruggedization, so making it corrosion proof, shock proof, so they could send more robots into more sewers. We actually gave them funding to help with that. We connected them with their partners for that. And then shortly after that, COVID hit, and they were able to pivot. And now they're really helping us all stay safe. But making sure those robots could be deployed at scale in the sewers really was necessary for them to be able to help us in the way that they are today.
Right, that's good to know. And yeah, we are watching those COVID numbers. So thanks to that company for their work. Harold, I do want to go back to that question. Describe a business that is best served by Interrise, and what are the offerings that you?
Sure. What Interrise focus on, once again, is established businesses. So these are businesses that have been around for 2 years or more, do $250,000 or minimum in business, and have at least 2 employees. So one to really go take the course, which is a 7-month, very intensive course that really you work on a 3-year growth strategy from the time you enter the course until the time you leave the course 7 months later. And that's a business plan that you can take out and take to a financial institution to attain financing, what have you. But the highlights of the program is how to understand your finances, how to access capital, and how to take care of your employees. Not only how to take care of your employees, how to take care of yourself, once again, as a CEO. So those are more the traditional businesses that we work with over the last 18 years.
Thank you. So let me stop here and just let you all know that in the chat, we have a number of the websites for each organization represented here on the panel. So please take those down and consider using, reaching out to each of those organizations for the resources that they can offer you. So tell me a little bit about common growth strategies and when you think businesses should not do and why. And again, I don't want to do all the talking here, folks, so I want some interaction between our panelists. So I'll kick it off with you, Harold. What are some of the common growth strategies? You have a lot of experience in this space. And what is one thing businesses should not do?
Oh, Daryl, you mean Daryl?
Daryl, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Daryl, Harold.
A lot of our companies, we teach them how to work on their business and in their business. And a lot of the companies is not taking on unnecessary loans or debt that you're not ready to take on at that time. And that's what a lot of people do. They really don't understand what's really working in their business, what product is working in their business, how to market that. But mostly it's if you're actually accessing that capital, make sure, one, you understand your finances down to the last decimal point, but also that you can afford to take on the debt that you're about to sign up for. But that's what we see mostly, and we make sure that you don't do that. And by bringing in subject matter experts and so on to help you go through that process.
Laura, I saw you nodding your head.
I think there's just so much wisdom in this roundtable, and I agree with so much that's being said. From a Forge perspective, the two things I always like to tell people not to do on the innovation side, don't assume you have to go overseas to manufacture. There are plenty of circumstances where that will make sense, but there are over 7,000 manufacturers right here in the Commonwealth. And there are a lot of competitive advantages to be unlocked, especially at the earlier and prototyping stages by going locally, because you can drive over, see it coming off the production line, communicate well with your partners, and you can avoid a lot of hidden fees when it comes to overseas production around tariffs, overseas management, the cost and the delays with overseas shipping right now. So we often find when we're talking to innovators, they assume they had to go overseas. And once we share with them the opportunities here, they're often really enthusiastic and glad that they tapped into that. Again, won't always make sense, but don't assume you have to go overseas if you're an innovator. And on the manufacturing side, don't be afraid to work with innovators. When we say startups to manufacturers, sometimes it's interpreted as a dirty word. They're thinking, oh, it's a hobbyist in their garage late at night. But the average company that Forge is working with has almost $1 million in funding. They have 8 employees, about half their budget's going to manufacturing. 20% are in full scale production. And this is a really important forward-looking set of business opportunities for manufacturers, especially when you think about attracting the young workforce. We're working with everything from making Frisbees to making nuclear fusion, and that's exciting to the rising workforce. So don't assume you have to go overseas, and don't assume startups are scary and bad.
All right, thank you. How about you, Glenn?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say one is execution is key, right? So execution is your best marketing strategy. And then also invest in infrastructure to be able to execute well, right? So that's everything from talent to, what is your digital platform? And so, and then I agree with Daryl, definitely don't over leverage yourself to get there, right? Especially Black and brown folks, we don't have second, third chances. And so we gotta reach profitability faster than most. That would be my advice, Don.
Great. And Harold?
I was going to actually say, again, everyone just has some great insight and input onto this. But one thing I did want to also mention is in terms of when it comes to growth, don't ignore inorganic growth strategies. So for example, meaning going out here and maybe considering buying a company or business that already has and displays the expertise and solid credentials that maybe you lack. It doesn't mean that it's going to be, oh, that's too expensive and that's just, not to steal someone's quote, Bain Capital type of stuff. But with regard to inorganic growth strategies, that basically is a way to scale at a much higher and faster pace. And then in addition to that, tapping into things that you may not directly have access to in terms of talent, human capital, expertise, credentials, tools, manufacturing capabilities, et cetera. So that's all I'd say is don't ignore going out here and maybe buying or making the acquisition of another company or complementary company.
Well, I'd like to know, as a entrepreneur myself, what would be the cost to participate in one or all of your programs? What is the cost to the entrepreneur?
I can, if I may go, Donna.
Sure.
We don't offer, there's no cost. So now that we have the recent MBDA project and grant award for the additional year of MBDA services specifically, and then we also have the 5-year operating grant from the MBDA. So all of our services are offered at no cost. And then in addition to that, we are also able to provide services and support via also a Massachusetts Growth Capital grant as well. specifically for Massachusetts state-based companies, et cetera. So we're able to provide this support at no cost to the specific clients or companies looking for support.
Daryl, how about you?
Same here at Enterprise right now. Our businesses that take the Streetwise MBA, our basic course that we offer is free to all companies. We're about to announce over the next couple of weeks a $3 million grant that we have from the state from the ARPA funding, where we're going to 8 gateway cities across Massachusetts to create a supplier diversity program, and that we expect we'll be able to touch 500 to 600 BIPOC businesses around Massachusetts in these gateway cities over the next year. So you should be seeing more information about this or reaching out to me over at enterprise.org so you can be part of this. And, we really want to focus that this is really statewide that we're going after. And to make sure that contractors, businesses, or whatever industry you're in, you're contract ready to do business with anchor institutions across the state.
Great, thank you. And Laura?
Again, nothing.
Yay.
Really important to us not to have barriers to access. So we don't charge startups or manufacturers or innovators anything for engaging with our events, our services, our trainings. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Daryl, who has quietly gone through a fire drill and I believe is standing in a parking lot right now.
Thank you, Daryl. And thank you, Laura. Hey, Glenn, how about you with BEI and MCCI?
Yeah, MCCI clearly, and we're doing financial products, so it's the cost of capital. I mean, these are right now 4, 5, 6% loans. Equity is equity. Those are negotiated direct, and so we try to be competitive with our or below, hopefully slightly below, because usually these are the unbankable deals. Yeah, and our high touch advisory, we do expect people to invest in their growth, and so it's at 10% of the cost. If you're under $1 million, and it's 20% over $1 million. But our program's not the cheapest, so they're probably about 50, 60 grand investing in per company, and so we ask the entrepreneurs to come along with that ride.
Great, thank you. So one of the other things that I've heard is very effective is encouraging some small businesses to work together. Especially when they're going after contracts. You're too small to go after a big corporate client yourself, but if you partner with someone, you have a better chance of winning the business. Can you all speak to that? I'm going to leave that open and see if you all will engage with each other.
Yeah, I was sorry not to jump the gun, but I would say definitely that's one of the things that I definitely advocate as an individual and personally in terms of just specifically entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur and owning a business and helping companies go out here and look at government contract opportunities. That's one of the things that we issue when it comes to counsel for G&E. And then also on the MBDA side that's another way of being able to tap into those types of past performance opportunities that you don't have access to is by collaborating with the company. You don't have the necessary past performance that maybe a federal agency or even a governmental agency is looking for and in need of. Well, there's definitely a company or business out here that's already done the work and has the expertise. So work with them, team with them, and see how you both can collaborate and go out here and take down a potential contract opportunity.
Great.
Yes, we encourage that too at Enterprise. After you take our course, or after I take our course, you become part of a alumni group of almost 10,000 companies, and we encourage that interaction. And what you see many times, companies involved in the same cohort. Excuse me for the background noise. Involved in the same cohort, they will come together, partner, combine to access more business, and we encourage that as you come together and Enterprise Connect, that you find like-minded companies across the country doing the same thing that you are, to steal ideas from and so on, to help grow your company.
So I didn't know if Glenn or Laura wanted to answer that, because I do have another question for you all.
No, I just say, what we try to do is create an atmosphere where people are interacting a little harder with the pandemic, clearly. I see Juliet Myers on. I know she as formerly was facilitating our CO roundtable. I've actually been doing that more recently, and you never know what's going to happen organically when you put people in a room and you create the atmosphere for trust and so on and so forth. So I know a lot of deals have come out of that environment, and so it's important for us to keep that going.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask a question about certifications. People, are you certified by the state? Are you certified by GME-MSDC, by WeBank, by the veterans organizations and/or LGBTQ? How important are certifications when going after business? And do you advise them to go after certifications?
I'll jump in there quickly. This is, and I don't want to say it's a controversial question, but at the end of the day, I think historically, what I've through a lot of our peer group is people have gone through the process and haven't seen a lot of benefit, right? And so there's the transactional cost and all that other fun stuff. I think things are getting better, and I think also the state and the city working together to make it more streamlined, and so other folks can talk about that directly, but. In our world, it's more self-identification. They self-identify. We're working with the entrepreneurs. We pull their taxes, but it's sometimes it's hard to get to the bottom of who owns things. But it's really a trust basis. I've always said in this space, and I'll stop, is the folks who I like the flexibility and the self kind of reporting where it makes sense. But I also think some of these programs like BECMA and Amplify in their list are also kind of almost third party kind of energy. And sometimes, but where it makes sense, absolutely people should certify clearly. I mean, that's where you get in the system, and I think a lot of good comes out of that also.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask one last question, and then we're going to open it up for our audience questions. So what's the most important point that you want people to come away with, having listened to your conversation? What's the most important thing that they can learn about what you have to offer? I'll start with you, Laura.
Well, I will say when you're innovating or developing or refining a physical product, a majority of your budget often does go to manufacturing. And if you haven't worked with manufacturers at scale before, there might be a lot of things that you're not even aware of that go into it. So on the innovator side, if you are getting ready to scale your manufacturing for the first time, or even just to tweak an element of your product and need to get in touch with local innovation-friendly manufacturers, we're here. And also on the manufacturing side, because we've worked with over 500 startups, they keep coming back to us as they scale. Some of them are quite large at this point. And we've de-risked them. If you're interested in manufacturing innovation, Forge is a great pathway to do that. And as we shared earlier, we don't charge anything on either side. So I do hope people take away that we can be a resource to you.
Great. Daryl?
So the main thing is don't be afraid to invest in yourself. So you see many companies who, they're quite busy. It's very difficult running your own business, and taking the time to take either one of these companies on the call, it's people hesitate themselves to take the time, but you will have to do the work. There is a lot of work involved in getting your business up to speed.
Thank you, Daryl. We got most of what you said. I appreciate that. Your biggest point was invest in yourself. It takes time, but it's important to do if you want to move forward and be successful. Harold.
One thing I did want to say, obviously, that this panel, even though it's more of a manufacturing focus, and we're talking about diverse owned businesses, is lean into those other diverse owned businesses, minority business enterprises, et cetera, whatever the diversity is, because you'll never know, because when you're doubling and tripling down on that in terms of that may be your next best supplier, that may be also your next best customer, and also it can be your teaming partner. So lean into those companies instead of just looking at it, I need to work with the federal government or I need a large corporate. You're missing opportunities by not gauging and tapping into the ecosystem and network that already exists in terms of diverse owned businesses.
And finally, Glenn.
Yeah, and when I was talking about what we offer to and the cost, I should have also started with, our commercial lending folks, there's no cost there. When people take calls and they work with our businesses, a lot of hand-holding. That's the first kind of earlier stage, some of the smaller companies. And I'd say, Donna, you asked, like, what do people want to, take away? From my world, it's this combination of a lot of things. It's really good advice. It's access to capital and other parts of the ecosystem that we're very, we really want to offer that to the folks who kind of come through the door.
Great. So now I just want to give a shout out to a few folks who put messages in the chat. Sarah Scala, who's certified as both an LGBTQ plus certified business enterprise and an SBA's women-owned small business, and she could be very helpful with supplier diversity. Also Megan Costa, who is Construction and Persons with Disabilities Program Coordinator for SDO, and that's, again, all of this is in the chat. And then Rosaria Uberio Manaya from Amplify Latinx. So please take a look at those connections there. It can be very helpful. So now, who has a question for us of this panel? I'm going to start with Michael Granger. I think you said you had a question.
Yeah. Well, what I had really was a comment, because Donna, you asked a question earlier regarding, you're enthusiastic. You came with your $3,000. You launched your business, and what would someone would tell you, right? What would someone tell you? Well, I started and built a venture capital fund investing in businesses, startups, and early stage businesses. And so I look at businesses through the eyes of an investor. And so the first thing I'd want to know from you is, what is your business model? And I think the vision of the founder is extremely important, right? Because the vision of the founder basically says, from the beginning, what's the vision, the founder's vision about what kind of business they would like to build, right? They may have initially a product, right? But at some point, they may want to figure out, how do I scale this business? Because for the business to be viable, I have to be able to scale it to get it to some critical mass, right? And so that's part of it. And then you deal with issues like, okay, how do I get this product to market, right? If the product costs $100 a unit versus 10,000, that's a different marketing strategy. You're not going to hire salespeople to go on the street and sell, $100 product, but you might do it for a $10,000 or $100,000 product. And so the revenue model, how are you going to get paid for it, right? Questions of whether it's a subscription model, whether it's like in some information technology businesses, whether it's a software as a service, that sort of thing, right? So different revenue models that you can look at, and then scalability, right? Scalability, right. Products. How are you going to scale, right? How are you going to scale production? How are you going to scale service? How are you going to scale sales, right? And then some companies start with one product or one service, and the question is, are you going to have a product line or a line of services, comprehensive, that you offer? And so you look at that and you say, okay, you're going to upgrade your existing product or service to some next level, right? Or you're going to build new products, and so, and then the idea that businesses need different things at different stages of development, right? So understanding what stage of development someone is at and what they're going to need, and anticipating those things. And of course, anticipating how the company is going to be staffed and built over time. So those are the sorts of things that I think about when companies approach.
Thank you, Michael. When we're talking, everybody gets so excited about starting a business, but nobody talks about the ugly side, the days when, there isn't an advisor there, and you're just by yourself figuring out, what the heck have I done? What kind of advice would you have for those businesses, for those folks? about how to keep themselves engaged and charged to go forward? Or do you just let them hang out there by themselves? What kinds of advice would you give them?
My first advice is get advisors.
Bingo.
Right.
Exactly right.
And we actually offer, we help subsidize when they're done advisory committees. That's how, because we spend so much energy really making sure we set the strategic path and we execute for the, up to 12 months. And then we don't want that to just go away. And we offer kind of subsidies advisor committee, it's subsidies up to 3 years post. That's how important we think it is. And it doesn't have to be like, it could be informal, formal. We like pushing entrepreneurs to have formal advisory committees, but there's also a whole bunch of informal advisory advice you could be getting in your network too.
I was also going to, since you brought that up, Glenn, I should have mentioned too that how critical it is to have people around you like a banker, an attorney, an accountant, someone who will tell you the hard truths when you think everything's rosy. You need devil's advocates around you who can tell you the truth. Can you all speak to that?
Well, I can speak to it as an entrepreneur. And
Yeah,
Don,
right.
I think you and I have been around for a while, running businesses, and having a CFO, that's internal, but having a CPA that you can trust and a legal team that you can trust. And again, the problem with some of that stuff, as soon as you get on a call with them, the time is ticking. But that it's well worth the having that phone a friend throughout your growth journey.
Laura, you were going to say something.
Very, very quickly, yes, those are very important. IP protection really matters with physical products, and good accounting and financial records really matter if you're trying to fundraise. So we often hear innovators saying, I just need money. And then we find out that's a proxy for they need help before they can get that money. But I actually would love to pass the mic to Juliet because I see she's been patiently raising her.
Oh, sorry, didn't see it. Go ahead, Juliet.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, my question's around you've been talking a lot about manufacturing companies, which I certainly understand. I'm a service business. My company is Inspiration Zone. I do diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting. Also help companies with strategic networking and provide speaking services and so forth. I actually have a podcast called Entering the Inspiration Zone. And so some of the things that I look for support on are sponsorships of my initiatives, the programs that I put on, including the podcast, and also connections in terms of companies who are serious about advancing DEI and would like some strategic help. One of the challenges that I find, and this is where, Karen asked the question about navigating business opportunities, is that oftentimes I'm certified, so I have all these certifications. I've been through actually Interrise. I'm actually just enrolled with GNE, and so I have all of these, and I'm also a consultant to AIM. But one of the challenges that I find is that companies indicate and express interest and attend forums such as this, and then they go back and you reach out to them and it's crickets. And so one of the challenges that I know me and other MBEs often run into is the lack of follow through from well-intentioned companies. And so I'd love to hear, in thinking about opportunities and also with the companies that you all work with, any thoughts that you have around that in terms of entrepreneurs in a service business who are trying to make inroads to new companies. Easy question.
That's a great question, Juliet. And one of the things that you do see, and this is not just specifically of me working with the council or the MBBA Center, is that one of the things that we do see is that sometimes, or many times, entrepreneurs and Glenn, business owners, and Daryl and Laura may vouch for as well, is that sometimes and you own a business, you get caught up in the minutia of what you have to deal with at whatever the moment is. And so that becomes the most important priority of, I got to make sure I close this deal, or I have to make sure I get this project done, or I have to get this out the door, et cetera, whatever it is. I find that being, and not to try to be prescriptive or try to say that this is the end all be all, but I do find that, and maybe this is from also the banking world, is that you have to basically be tenacious and just follow up. Where the others don't follow through, you just have to follow up. That's it.
Yeah. And if I can just interject, as I wanted to be clear that talking about you've already had the conversation or may have made the connection. Networking is one of my specialties. And so now you're at the point where the companies, so this is more of the, it's mostly large companies, the companies are now having to do their part. And so that's what I'm referencing.
If I might, let me
just interject here, because we're very short on time, and I'm going to cut off this particular conversation and kick it to Sarah, because she's had her hand up for forever, and I want to make sure I get her in. Sarah, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Scala. My company is 10 years old, and I provide leadership development, LGBT speaking and coaching, as well as some DEI support resources, in addition to talent management, of course. And as I've listened to some folks looking for resources, folks have been sharing resources, in addition to AIM, which has so far been wonderful. I've only been a member about a month or so. SCORE has been really instrumental in my business's success. I've had over 10 mentors throughout the year, and they've provided at no cost some quick legal consults, Q&A on taxes, business development resources, and I wouldn't discount SCORE, especially for those of us who are running small businesses. I'm so thankful that I even wrote a blog about them a couple of years ago, just as, again, an additional resource for those of you who are startup or small business, in addition to AIM. If it's okay, I'll throw the link to my little blog about the benefits I've received, but it's been exceptional. So just keep in mind, there are so many good resources to help those of us that are small business or, supplier diversity focused. So thanks, everybody. Great session today.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm sorry to have to close out, but we are coming up on time, and I'm a stickler about wanting to end on time. So I want to thank our panelists, Laura Teischer from Forge, Glenn Lloyd from both organizations, BEI and MCCI, Harold Blackwell for MBE Growth and Development, and Daryl Byers. And thanks again, Daryl, for being so tenacious and figuring out a way to get back on this call. He's CEO of Interrise. I want to thank AIM and everyone who helped make this panel happen, and wish you all a good rest of the day. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you.